This is Lorraine Wilburn, and you're listening to Two Broads Talking Politics. I'm excited to introduce this episode, coming to you from the great state of Ohio, Betsy Rader and Susan Moran Palmer, and Lorraine Wilburn, running for Ohio House, District 48. Enjoy!
Hi, everyone. This is Kelly with Two Broads Talking Politics. I'm here in this segment with Betsy Rader, who's the Democratic nominee for the Ohio 14th District. Hi, Betsy.
Hi, good morning.
So thank you so much for joining me. And maybe we could start with just a little bit of background. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about who you are and why you're running for Congress?
I have lived in my district for the past 24 years. My husband and I have 3 kids who went to the public schools here, but I was born down in Appalachia, in the part of Ohio that's called Appalachia, and my dad was a game warden, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom. And when I was 9, they divorced, and my mom became a single mother of 4. And so I grew up really poor, and that has, had a big influence on me and my priorities as I have steered my volunteerism and my career and now this decision to run for Congress. Because I think one thing that you find when you grow up struggling to make ends meet is that you really don't feel like you have a voice in what happens to you. And so I've always been really involved in helping people have a voice. Like I ran my county's child advocacy program for abused children, and now I advocate for people who've been fired from their jobs illegally. And so part of the reason I really wanted to run for Congress was to make sure that everyone is being served by our government and not just, the wealthy special interest groups that are able to donate to campaigns.
Can you tell us a little bit about the Ohio 14th District? So it looks at least like it's one of the least weird-looking districts in Ohio, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. So whereabouts in Ohio is this, and what's sort of the makeup of it?
Sure. And actually, the fact that it doesn't look so weird does have meaning here. It's one of the very least gerrymandered districts in Ohio. It's the northeast corner of the state. So it starts in the eastern suburbs of Cleveland in Cuyahoga County, and it has the northern suburbs of Akron. And so it's actually the second highest educated, second highest income district in the state of Ohio. But it's got an interesting variety because then it goes out from those outer ring suburbs along Lake Erie and out to the Pennsylvania border. So it also includes those semi-rural and rural areas. And I actually live right in the middle of the district in Geauga County, and I live in an old 1847 farmhouse that's an old sheep farm. So it's got just about every type of demographic in it, except we don't have any big cities in this district. And it's what's called an R+5, which means that it leans Republican, but it's a district that U.S. Senator Sherrod Brown's always won. So it's one of those swing districts that people are talking about this year.
Yeah, definitely. I grew up in Stark County, Ohio, and so certainly that was always a swingy place when I lived there. And so I'm trying to sort of sort out, it's R+5, and, in this kind of wave election, and like you said, the swing districts that we're looking at, it seems like that should be a totally winnable district, but it doesn't look like there's been a whole lot of polling at all.
No, there hasn't. It's been kind of a disappointment to me that there's, as far as I know, and I think I would know, there is no public polling for this district. So when some of the national prognosticators are looking at it, they really don't have that much to go on. They're just going by, past results, which I obviously don't think are predictive of what's going to happen this year.
Yeah, and so what is the sort of feeling and momentum on the ground as you're going around and talking to people? What are the kinds of things you're hearing?
Well, we have incredible grassroots energy in this district. I mean, we have knocked on tens of thousands of doors and have so many volunteers, and especially in some of these suburbs that people had considered in the past to be, they were kind of your moderate Republican suburbs, are just coated in Betsy Rader signs. And, so people can really see that there is a lot of interest in this race and that people are really willing to look at the candidates this year. And so people, the feeling is one of, wow, we may actually have a voice this year. We could flip this seat.
So what are some of the issues then that are your priorities if you would be elected?
Well, in addition to the work I just described, I have a healthcare background. I worked as senior counsel at the Cleveland Clinic, and I worked at the Innovation Center at Medicare and Medicaid and helped to implement the Affordable Care Act. And, in this election season, I have to say, for one thing, I should say it's what really made me first started thinking about running for Congress was when they were trying to repeal the Affordable Care Act last year. And the incumbent Republican here had run, like so many of them, on a platform of repealing what he called Obamacare. And, bragged in all of this campaign literature and ads that, he had voted every time he could to repeal it 31 times. And when they were looking at repealing it, I was going with these, other people to his office who were really concerned about losing their health care. People with things like Crohn's disease and diabetes, these pre-existing conditions where they'd never had coverage before. And they were just terrified of losing their coverage. And he wouldn't meet with us. He wouldn't have a town hall. His staff really treated us disrespectfully. And I thought, you know what? I could do better than this. I'm willing to listen to people, and I really care about making sure everyone has access to healthcare. It's the most fundamental thing. I myself, for instance, was completely disabled at one point. My spine collapsed down on the nerves to my right leg, and I was in debilitating pain, had to have a spinal fusion. And I remember thinking at that time, I was still just like 40 when that happened. And I thought, wow, this is it could be the end. I can't take care of my kids. I can't go to work. And so I could really empathize with these people's fears. And I have to say what I have found in once I decided to run in campaigning is it's not just, the health insurance. What I really hear a lot about from people is the prescription drug prices. From young to old, people are really being harmed by the exponential increase in prescription drug prices. And that is a problem that really has some pretty simple solutions if you weren't dealing with the special interest pharmaceutical lobbies who don't want us to reform pharmaceutical pricing. And so I would say, what really resonates with voters and what I hear a lot about is the cost of healthcare, the cost of prescription drugs, and the concern that in so many different areas like the environment, the decisions that are being made in Washington aren't really reflecting, what the constituents need. They're really following this special interest money that's putting so much corruption into our politics these days.
You talked some about how you grew up as influencing you, but let's talk too about being a mom and what sort of effect that's had on your political outlook and your desire to be in political service.
Oh, well, of course, it's had a huge influence in so many ways. At the age of 57, I could arguably just kind of, go out and crawl into a hole and just kind of let the future unfold. But, when you think about your kids and you think about everybody else's kids, you want to make sure that this is going to continue to be a strong and thriving country for them to grow up and have their families in. And a particular concern for me with my three kids is that my two sons are both gay. And, they're in their 20s and, they just want to have the same life as anyone else. They want to be able to have a job and not be discriminated against. They want to be able to adopt kids. They want to get married. My middle son is married. He got married last year. And it's really what tipped me over the edge in deciding to run because, on both the national, President Trump level, as well as this particular incumbent here, Dave Joyce, there has been already this erosion of gay rights. President Trump and the Department of Justice have argued that the civil rights laws for employment shouldn't apply to people based on their sexual orientation, so it should be okay for an employer to discriminate against my boys. And then they argued in the Masterpiece Cake Shop decision successfully that businesses should be allowed to discriminate and even put a sign in the window saying that my sons aren't welcome. And David Joyce, the Republican incumbent here, he voted on the Appropriations Committee that it should be okay for child welfare agencies to discriminate against same-sex couples in adoption. And in the past, he has, he's on video saying that he's against same-sex marriage. And his campaign staff a couple weeks ago refused to back off of that decision. And so, I'm concerned in general for our democracy, for our environment, for, our economy, for our children. But for me, it's really personal because I have two sons who I love deeply who are being actively discriminated against, both by this congressman and by this administration.
So you've had a lot of high-profile endorsements, of course, President Barack Obama, Senator Sherrod Brown, but also, more importantly, probably for the voters, some big newspapers. The Akron Beacon-Journal is actually the paper that I grew up reading, and they endorsed you. Can you talk some about the endorsements and the importance of those in the race?
Well, to me, the ones that are meaningful are the ones where they really know the district and they really know the candidates. And so, the Akron Beacon-Journal endorsement was very thoughtful and really laid out, the reasons for deciding to endorse me. But one that really also really meant a lot to me, I just got yesterday, and it was the Chagrin Valley Times and the Solon Times and the Geauga Courier, because what those endorsements started out by saying was that they know both of us. Both the incumbent and I live in Geauga County and have both been involved in the community for many years. And that endorsement laid out all the reasons why it made sense to vote for me on issues like healthcare, on issues like job development, on issues like checks and balances in Washington. And so that really made me proud that people who have, seen me active in my community for many, many years and also seen my opponent chose to endorse me.
Is there anything else that you want to make sure that we talk about?
I think in addition to the healthcare issues, if you don't mind, I'll start with healthcare, because one thing that's happened in this campaign is, of course, that there's been a lot of attack ads by the opponent. And as a matter of fact, he's relied almost entirely on attack ads for his campaign. He really doesn't have a ground operation going. And it's a little unusual. I know, politics always, unfortunately seem to get ugly with the attack ads, but his are unusual in that every ad he has run has gotten sometimes both national and local media attention for having inaccurate information, just lies about me in them. The first ad he did that was an attack ad was about my healthcare position, and it got 4 Pinocchios from the Washington Post. It also, an editorial was done by the Akron Beacon-Journal. The Plain Dealer had an article about it, and it just misrepresented my position on healthcare and then attacked a position I don't have. And it's kind of this standard template. When the Washington Post gave it 4 Pinocchios, they pointed out that there were like 15 races across the country. And then it was interesting, the day after this started, then Trump in USA Today kind of laid out this template where they would say everybody's a socialist, everybody wants a government takeover of healthcare and kick people off their employer health plan, and that is not a position I have taken. And then the next attack ad that he just put out this past week There was an article in Cleveland.com yesterday pointing out that it's lying again about my position. He's saying that I have pledged to raise middle-class taxes and, again, all this stuff about me raising taxes, and it's just factually not true. And the source that he cited for those statements in that ad, they issued a press statement saying this is a lie and we don't want to be cited in this way. And so, it's frustrating because what happens is those attacks get put out there and then the super PACs pick them up and it gets disseminated, not just on TV, but also in direct mail that these super PACs send out. And it really then turns you back to this whole money and politics thing is, trying to raise the money to get the truth out to people. And I'm happy to debate our real policy positions, but, that's not what's happening here. So that's frustrating. And again, like I said, it just ties into the problem with having all this big money in politics and not really having a level playing field to communicate with voters. But I would say in addition to, the healthcare issues and my desire to have a rational debate about healthcare reform, the environment is a big issue. And again, there's just so much money in politics from the fossil fuel industry. You have the EPA being dismantled. And with Lake Erie bordering this district, clean air, clean water protections are really important to folks in this district. And I'm endorsed by the Sierra Club. My opponent has a 7% lifetime rating from the League of Conservation Voters. He's consistently voted against clean water and air protections. And so now that's another issue that I hear about a lot, especially young people are really worried about the environment and our future.
If our listeners would like to help support you in this final little stretch of the campaign, how can they do that?
Well, we have incredible field operations, so there are many opportunities to canvass, knock on doors, get out the vote, and they can go to Betsy Rader for Congress, and it's spelled out FOR, BetsyRaderForCongress.com to sign up to help out in these final days. And of course, we still always need donations to make sure we are communicating the truth to voters. And you can also do that on BetsyRaderForCongress.com. Guess I'd also mention that we have an excellent Facebook and various other social media platforms. So I'd love it if people go there and like and share our information again to spread the truth.
All right. Thank you so much for talking with me today. I've been super excited about all the Ohio races this year, and I'm really looking forward to a bunch of you surprising people who haven't bothered to pull your districts.
Yeah, I am really looking forward to election night and having them say, oh, geez, why weren't we paying enough attention to that race?
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
In this segment, I am here with Susan Moran Palmer, who is the Democratic nominee for Congress in the Ohio 16th District. Hi, Susan.
Hi, good evening.
So could you start by telling us just a little bit about yourself and why you're running for Congress this year?
Sure. I am a 50-year-old working professional mother. I have 3 teenage sons eating me out of house and home. I have been married for just under 20 years, and we've lived in our congressional district for about 19 of those 20 years. I'm running for Congress because I grew up in the Youngstown area. If you're familiar with Ohio, it's on the western side up against Pennsylvania. And we went through a period where the steel industry was kind of gutted in Youngstown, and it really gutted our community. And it makes for a very hard knock kind of life where you learn the hard way. And I graduated high school with a 22% unemployment rate in the city I grew up in. So I climbed that economic ladder out of Youngstown. It's a great place to begin your foundation. I grew up in a double union, solid middle-class family that I'm very thankful for. But I climbed that ladder, started out with a radiology technology degree, and then I finished my undergraduate in business at Baldwin Wallace. I started out putting in pacemakers and defibrillators and coronary stents into patients. That's the area of cardiology I specialized in. And then as we were able to actually stop heart attacks from happening, I was approached by a company to help teach physicians how to do these type of techniques. So I came out of the hospital at that point and went on the business side of medicine, both teaching, clinical research, account management, and management in general. And then I also worked for a startup company out of California for about 3 years, and then I owned and operated my own medical consulting firm for, 9. And then we sold the company to Medtronic, and I worked for them up until I won the primary.
All right. And so I actually grew up in what's now the 16th District.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I grew up in Jackson Township.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, and so actually, my mom has already voted for you. She early voted, and my dad has not yet voted. Dad, go vote. So I know this district very well, although it didn't used to be quite as odd-looking as it is now. But for listeners who aren't quite as familiar, could you talk to us a little bit about kind of what all this very oddly shaped district encompasses?
Well, and again, for Ohio, we've been gerrymandered since the 2010 census. So in 2012, they redistricted us with basically a very slick algorithm in a computer. And it actually divides some districts, some of my counties up across the street from each other. They're in 2 different congressional districts. Mm-hmm. And we have the district around Akron, which is Summit County, that has 4 congressional districts in it. Isn't that incredibly silly? So mine has 5 parts of 5 counties and then 1 whole county. And it's very disparate needs within the district. So the upper districts, which are suburbs of Cleveland, suburbs of Medina, suburbs of Akron, are all bedroom communities. And Canton as well. I certainly consider North Canton and Jackson bedroom communities. It's all the suburban, just like my husband, double income, professional working families. We have all those communities going down, and then I have all of Wayne County, which is a large food processing and agricultural community. So very disparate needs within the community. And, the district spans an hour and a half, 90 to 100 miles end to end. So it's a very large district, and they tend to be represented from people that live far away from them just because it's such a scattered district.
And this is a district that's actually open right now. The incumbent is running for Senate. And so what's sort of the sense, it seems like there hasn't been a whole lot of polling, and a lot of the rankings are just sort of, based on prior things that were going on. What's your sense of the district right now and the sense of the state of the race?
Well, I was thrilled that there was a poll that came out that was done by Target Point, which is a Republican pollster. They handled the Bushes and the Romneys. They came out with a poll in the area showing the separation only at 9 points, which is fantastic for me. Jim Renacci won this district by 30 points in the 2016 election. That was my current congressman who's not running for a seat again. So to have a 9-point spread from a Republican pollster, which was probably leaning a little bit towards the Republican in its question form, is probably close to a +6, +5 district, which is fantastic for me because I hadn't even gone up on the air yet. We have a very strong grassroots community. It was certainly within my campaign. We've written, I believe the number is 25,000 postcards from one 16th congressional district voter to another. I've got, it's got to be close to 700 volunteers now doing this type of work. So it's very grassroots, a lot of door knocking. We canvass more than any other congressional district in Cuyahoga County, which is around Cleveland. So I have some very rabid volunteers, and I'm very lucky to have them. And it's made a difference just getting through to people if I'm that close without even starting advertising.
Yeah, definitely. And you just went up on the air, right?
We did. We just went up in the air this Tuesday.
Excellent. And so what are some of I assume healthcare is one of the issues that's a priority for you. What are some of the other issues that you're really focusing on and hearing from people in the district about?
Well, certainly healthcare is number one, and even within the farming community, you would think that the tariffs were their number one concern, and they're not. They are getting hurt by the tariffs very badly, but they want to support the president, so they do not complain about it. But their healthcare costs, because the population is spread across a large agricultural area, and there's only one hospital and basically one system of doctors, their healthcare costs are actually quite high. So they complain about healthcare. Now, although obviously healthcare is my expertise, it encompasses a lot of things in Ohio. We're the number one state for opioid overdose deaths in the country, and the number one county is Summit County, which is also within my district. So it encompasses healthcare covers that, and then it's also a big economic driver in our district. Northeast Ohio is known for medicine. It's, between the Cleveland Clinic Foundation, Metro Health, and the university health systems, not only do we have lots of healthcare providers, we have lots of businesses wrapped around healthcare. So when you look at rescinding the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare, it's not just the people that you're going to be leaving out in the cold. It's not just the addiction treatment people that you're signing a death warrant on. It's also the high-paying jobs that come with the dollars that come in from the federal government for all these patients to be treated, and it's the businesses associated with them. So the footprint that would leave with the repeal would very, very much hurt my district and certainly the state of Ohio. So that's number one for me. Second, again, there are things that are great about Ohio that will never change no matter what happens with our industries. Ohio is a very central state. So we are 500 miles from the majority of the country. That's why we are still number one job in my district is manufacturing. So how can I draw more manufacturers to this area? We've had a lot of job loss. We've had a lot of wage loss in Ohio. Even though our unemployment rate is lower, we are still 150,000 jobs lower than we were in 2000, and our income is 10% under the national average. So these are both very serious issues for my district and for the state. So what I'd like to have some infrastructure investment within Ohio. Think solar fields, think wind farms. That's how we reduce the cost of electricity, and that pulls manufacturers in. There's a lot of industries that are very highly reliant on electricity to produce whatever it is they're producing, whether it's aluminum or steel, and reducing the cost of electricity to them will draw them in. So infrastructure investment and certainly healthcare. And again, in Ohio, healthcare wraps around so much.
So I watched some great remarks by you from the Grab 'em by the Midterms rally in Cuyahoga. So can you talk a little bit about the importance of having more women in Congress? If I'm reading Wikipedia right, and I think I am since I lived in the district, there's never been a woman representing this district in Ohio.
No, and actually Ohio is the third largest female contingent running for Congress in the country, behind California and Pennsylvania. Even though we're pretty small, we have a lot of women running for Congress in our state. It shows you truly the progressive nature of the Democratic Party in our state. And I think in general, it doesn't make a difference if you're a Republican, independent, or Democratic woman. We will never be treated equally until we are represented equally. And that's just the way it is. And we haven't been represented equally ever, not just our state, but our country. If you want things to be addressed, not just health care, not just paid maternity leave, but to actually have a more holistic look without all the infighting. When was the last time you saw Senator Collins, screaming at someone or saying, lock them up? I mean, she's a Republican senator. You've never heard her speak like that. The same can be said of almost any female senators or House representatives. It's just more collaborative, more team-focused, more behind-the-doors bargaining, the way it's supposed to be, to get the job done. So I think in that regard, women kind of checked their ego at the door, which I think is a huge advantage for the country right now.
And you're a mom as well. You're a mom of 3 sons. I'm a mom of 2 sons. Mine are a little bit younger. Can you talk a little bit about sort of the issues that are important to you because you're a mom, the kinds of things that being a mom has helped influence your positions on?
Well, and it's funny. You grow up in Youngstown, and I admit you're a little paranoid. You tend to kind of look over your shoulder a bit. So I did not take the kids to many functions, either in the primary or general election, concerned for their safety. They're all big kids. They're all bigger than me. And I know they would step in to try to protect me. So I worried about that, and I still worry about their safety. I'm a Moms Demand Action gun sense candidate. And again, you grew up in Youngstown. My family hunts. Everyone in my family, including me, owns a gun. So I'm not opposed to the Second Amendment, but we have a gun violence issue in this country. And when we keep turning the argument to increasing school safety, it'll just switch the venue. We've had shootings in theaters. We've had shootings in concerts, malls, hospitals. This is not a school safety issue. This is a gun violence issue, and it needs to be addressed. And it's been swept under the rug. And again, I think more women, regardless of party, will address the issue. We're more wrapped around it. We're more concerned for our children, and we will put ideology aside to protect our children. And I think that's paramount for this subject. The 3 things I recommend, which, if you don't know, gun sense candidates actually have to have a written policy posted so it can be adhered to. I had no problem with that. Mandatory background checks for every gun sale. And I told a gentleman in my farming area, that if I can pre-qualify you for a $400,000 mortgage, I'm sure I can pre-qualify you for a gun show on the weekend. I'm sure an entire cottage industry will grow around gun checks. I mean, this is not an issue because people who aren't supposed to have guns know exactly where to go to get a gun. You know, if you got a restraining order, you have a previous felony conviction, or let's say you're someone that wants to cause our citizens harm, and you're not allowed to buy a weapon, whether because you're from another country or because you're a felon, you know right where you need to go to get your gun and your ammunition. It's not a problem, and we have to make it a problem. We have to create some barriers between the people who should not have guns and the guns. That doesn't have anything to do with law-abiding citizens buying weapons. Number 2 is the red flag laws, and I actually have support from everybody for that. I haven't had one person, even the staunchest defender of the Second Amendment rights, mind the red flag laws. It allows the courts and families to prevent someone from buying or removing weapons in their home if they're a threat to themselves or others. I don't know if you're aware, but we have a double-digit suicide rate among returning Iraq and Afghanistan veterans when they're here, not when they're deployed, but when they're home. And their number one weapon of choice is unfortunately guns. So to give families an option to get that person into therapy and treatment by removing weapons from their possession, I realize it's just one step, but it's the right step, and most everybody likes. And then lastly, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms has no authority right now. So when they tried to bring the bump stock into the United States, ATF tried to block it. They tried to say, that takes a weapon to an automatic. Those are prohibited in the United States. But the manufacturer had written it around the current legislation exactly, and how they made it, and no mechanisms. They made it so the ATF couldn't stop them. And the ATF isn't considered law enforcement. It's under the executive branch. They need to have the executive control to say, no, that's prohibited. And that's something we would have to pass legislation for. But those are the 3 aspects of, I think, what will help reduce the gun violence in the United States.
Is there anything else that you would like to make sure that we talk about?
For me, this is a unique election. I found the 2016 presidential election unique as well. I felt unheard. I felt that the country is truly at a crossroads. Are we going to reset the course of this country? Are we going to continue down that path of divisiveness? And these last 2 years have been truly, truly divisive. And now, in the last few weeks, it's turned dangerous to serve your country. It is now a danger to you and your family. So I am not comfortable not fighting for my country. I was professionally successful, happy marriage, happy kids. To step away from all that, it's because I am driven to fix this issue. I am my community, been here for 20 years, nonprofit work. This is my community, and I will defend it. And I will bring it back to where it should be, not where we are now.
If our listeners would like to help you out in this little stretch left before the election, how can they do that?
Susan Palmer for Congress.com, and you can donate online. If you prefer to send a check, do it quickly, and right on the donation page is the address you can send it to.
All right, terrific. We'll put a link for that up on our website as well. So, Susan, thank you so much for speaking with me today. I'm really excited to talk to you specifically, since you are hopefully going to be representing my parents soon.
And everyone I know was from Jackson. It's so funny. We went on a college tour with one of the kids, and the girl was from Jackson.
It's a great place to be from.
Yes, it is. It's a lovely community.
So I'm so thrilled that you're stepping up and running, and I can't wait. And I said this to Betsy Rader as well. I can't wait for election night to come and everyone to see all these districts they ignored in Ohio, that we're going to have a lot of great Democratic women winning.
From your mouth to God's ears, let's hope. I love Betsy. She's lovely. So, yes, all the best.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thanks for listening to Two Broads Talking Politics. Our theme song is called Are You Listening? Off of the album Elephant Shaped Trees by the band Immunuri, and we're using it with permission of the band. Our logo and other original artwork is by Matthew Wethlin and was created for use by this podcast.